Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Erik and Derek with Tiger Football Talk. We are honestly just two Clemson grads who love nothing more than to talk a little more about Clemson football each week. I'm your host, Derek New. We'll shoot over to Erik in just a second, but we're coming here today after the ACC championship game. A complete game top to bottom throughout for the Clemson Tigers, absolutely dismantling the rematch against Notre Dame, winning 34-10, getting their sixth straight ACC championship victory. Before we go too much into the details, Erik, you thought this was going to be a 38-24 kind of game. What was the most surprising about this game? What was the most surprising thing you saw?
Well, look, I mean, I did say in the pregame that I could see this game being a 21-0 Clemson at half or Notre Dame at half. And that's kind of the way the game played out. I felt like it was going to be a momentum game where whoever got the most pressure on Trevor or on Ian Book and flustered them would kind of cement the game. I think what was most surprising to me is that we talked all season about, our team being healthy and all these players being out and it being an excuse and next man up and all of that. And I think what was most surprising to me was this defense for Clemson. I mean, they stepped up and, literally held Notre Dame to 3 points at half and 3 points almost all the way throughout the game, and really had those goal line stands, or that red zone stand that we're used to seeing out of Brent Venable's squad. When the field starts to condense, our defense typically steps up and holds team to field goals, which is exactly what happened in this game. But I think that's what's the most surprising to me is finally seeing the Clemson team that we've been thinking about, that we've been talking about, that we've seen statistically with our players being healthy, what they could be, finally seeing that come to play at this ACC championship game. And it was a sight to see. I mean, the beginning, probably 4 or 5 drives for both teams was still very much on edge, but pulling that out towards half and really flustering Ian Book really cemented the game for Clemson, and super excited to see where the Clemson Tigers are going to go in the college football playoff.
Yeah, and we didn't even have Xavier Thomas. That was a surprise, and Dabo Swinney was not willing to elaborate. He just said that he was unavailable for the game. Not really sure 100% what that means, but this is the healthiest version of the defense that we've really seen. Last time we saw them against Virginia Tech, Skalski's only in there for a series. I don't think Andrew Booth played. Xanders was still out, so we still had a ton of guys missing. If we would have had Xavier Thomas, that would have been the complete defense really putting in a complete effort. Honestly, for me, it was the running game. We talked last week about this game, and we're like, honestly, if we get 100 yards rushing, that's good. I think that would have been a good surprise for us in order to maintain a semblance of balance. But to be able to see our offensive line go out and really be aggressive, and for the first time all year, making it to that second level to take on linebackers and really opening up some plays. I know Trevor Lawrence being able to add his versatility really helps. And honestly, DJ Uiagalelei did such a good job of stepping in for Trevor Lawrence. But one thing I didn't think about until I really started watching the game, and that's something that Skalski and Trevor Lawrence both did, is they kept getting us into the right calls in the right plays. So Trevor Lawrence kept checking back and forth, and I think that helps with the run game to try and open it up. Is him with his experience, seeing what the defense is doing and making a call to adjust to it. I think it ended up being a major difference in this game.
Yeah, and you talk about this game, and we have to give props to Notre Dame once again. They came out just as good as they came out last time. I think Ian Book was 4 for 4 going in the first drive. They drove right down the field on their first possession, and they just got stopped a little bit short. They hit a 51-yard field goal, which was an ACC record, ACC championship game record, and then they came right back out and did it again. They drove all the way down the field into the red zone, and unfortunately, once again, the Clemson Tigers their defense stiffened up in the red zone and stopped them, and the kicker missed a chip shot. But barring those first 2 drives, I honestly felt like this was going to be the same kind of game as it was last time. Pound for pound, trading punches, seeing who would get the ball last, seeing who would get that big stand, who would make the big play. And honestly, that's how it was through the first quarter. And then, obviously, like you said, having Trevor Lawrence back, making those adjustments, seeing the field just a little bit more, going through his reads, seeing stuff pre-snap, not only in changing the play and audibly into different things, but on that first touchdown pass to Amari, I think Trevor saw that before the ball was even snapped. He moved the safety with his eyes to the right, threw back to the left almost immediately. Like he knew it was there. And that's a huge difference from DJ, who's a true freshman who's just coming into this offense and learning it. And he's going to be the next big thing. Don't get me wrong. But having Trevor back there with the experience, obviously adding that run game into this was huge. But one thing I have to say, for the first time all season, Tony Elliott called an almost complete game. We had that little hiccup there in the middle, as we typically do in the third quarter. We had a lull in the third quarter, but I have to say I was happy with Tony Elliott's play calling. He got the playmakers the ball. It felt like he was calling the right runs and passes and read options at the right time. Was really happy to see that out of our offense.
Hey, he knew it was an audition for the Auburn head coaching job, so he wanted to make sure he put his best foot forward. No, we're kidding. Apparently that wasn't a thing, and he was upset by the rumors. But no, I was waiting to see how long it would take you to bring that up, because you've been a little critical of Tony Elliott throughout the year. He has the talent. He has a couple highlights throughout the game, but a complete game from start to finish, and that's what he did. I want to circle back to what Brian Kelly was kind of talking about after the game, what his initial thoughts were, echoing a lot of the same points you talked about. The first 3 drives, one was a long field goal. The second one was a missed field goal chip shot. Then the third one, they went for it on 4th down, and the wide receiver has it right in his hands and just drops it, goes right on through. And you look like, if they were able to convert, shoulda, woulda, coulda, what does this game look like? I still think Clemson comes out on top, but now all of a sudden they're down, and they don't really have those sort of drives really the rest of the game. But you penetrate onto the Clemson side of the field 3 times to start the game. You come away with 3 points. It's not exactly a good recipe for success. And you and I were talking about this game before we went on to record, and this was more reminiscent of the college football playoff matchup we had against them in 2018. Really from a stat and a feel perspective, because the second quarter lost this game for Notre Dame, just like it did in 2018. And it was big plays from Clemson. It was us winning both lines of scrimmage. And again, second quarter, we scored 17 points. They scored none. This game was over with by halftime. And Notre Dame, again, not having the same firepower as other teams, other elite teams, in order to really catch back up. Notre Dame can win one way, and that is leaning on you with their heavy running game, and then precision passing from Ian Book, who uses mobility. But this is just not a team that they get down by even a touchdown or 2. They're just not built to come back.
Yeah, and I said this on Thursday. I was curious to see how Brent Venables was going to come out with 2 weeks of prep for this game, playing them once before, to see what our defense would look like, what our schemes would look like. I assumed we'd go back to that 3-3-5, and we did that. I think we kind of masked it a little bit with 4 or 5 guys down on the line that weren't truly D linemen. They were really linebackers and DBs. Trenton Smith played a huge role in this game, lining up on the outside in the defensive end position. But the problem was Ian Book was never able to set up in the pocket, and this was the big adjustment that Brent Venables made, which was seal the pocket and then close the pocket. And anytime, and keep your eyes on Ian Book, whether it's linebackers blitzing, whether it's the defensive line, you could always see that they were pushing their guys, but they were always keeping their eye on Ian. And when Ian tried to make a move, when he kind of step into the pocket or try to step around, you could see our defensive line manipulating themselves to prevent that from happening. And that was the big adjustment that Brent Venables made. Instead of all-out blitzing or trying to do these stunts where you're doing spin moves and trying to get around your guy or inside their guy, he let the guys settle in, create the pocket. But the only way that works is if you can cover downfield. And that, to me, that's the biggest surprise of this game, is how well our CBs and our safeties covered downfield. I mean, we had 6 sacks in this game, which is an ACC record. And I have to say that probably 90% of them were covered sacks, where Ian Book had all the time in the world to throw, and there was just nobody open.
Yeah, I think the only one I remember that wasn't a cover sack is where they just bull rushed right at the middle. I think Miles Murphy got in there, but every other one, I mean, he's just running around back there trying to get something creative. And then I think at some point, towards the second and third quarter, his eyes just kind of started failing him. He started bringing his eyes down. I think Brent Venables honestly probably pulled up some tape of when we used to play Lamar Jackson back in the day. I know it might be an insult to either one of those, saying that, I know Ian Book's not Lamar Jackson, but when you have that athletic of a quarterback out there who's able to make people miss, that's what you have to do. You have to game plan around him. I don't think they necessarily did that the first time around. I think they underestimated the escapability of Ian Book. I know I did. So having 2 weeks to prepare obviously helped them out a ton. Brian Kelly mentioned that, one of the biggest differences in this game was third down conversions. If you looked at what they were last time around, so in the first matchup, Notre Dame was over 50%. They were 10 of 19 on third down, and it was Clemson who was at 27%. We just could not sustain drives. There's a couple things in this game that flipped the script, and third downs are one of them, because this time around, Notre Dame was 3 of 12 on third down, and we were over 57%, 8 of 14. That's just the escapability of Ian Book was being limited. They were getting sacks earlier in the downs, and also the running game was not helping them. So how many times was Ian Book in 3rd and 8 or more? It seems like it was majority of the third downs. It was no longer 3rd and 3 where the offense has the advantage. Now you're in 3rd and 8. Brent Venables is going to win that 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, and we talk about those third downs, and honestly, they were long third downs. What was kind of most surprising to me was Kyron Williams. I mean, he ran all over Clemson that first matchup, and I don't know if it was having Tyler Davis back and Skalski and Mike Jones back, or if it was Brent Venables doing some adjustments where we were kind of doing a lot of zone looks to keep everything in front of us. I go back to that first snap. It literally looked like we dropped almost everybody back into zone. No one rushed because they just wanted to keep everything in front of them. They were willing to give up 3 and 5 yard throws and catches and runs, but they wanted to keep everything in front of them to not let any big plays go by. Kyron Williams, Notre Dame only had 44 rushing yards in the ACC championship game. Compare that to 208 yards the first time these teams met up. I mean, that's a crazy change, which really set up, like you said, that Notre Dame offense to be behind the chains most of the night, looking to try to complete these long third down plays, which, if you're on defense, you know what they're trying to get, and it's so much easier to stop. And Ian Book he was athletic, he was making plays out there, but the Tigers just kept coming up one more on him.
Yeah, and, again, we talk about elite teams, and I don't want to crap on Notre Dame too much, but elite teams, I mean, there's been times where Clemson has had to win games where consistently we have third and longs. Really, it's been the kind of summary of the season. We've not been able to run the ball in 75% of our games, and it's been Trevor Lawrence having to make these throws and, attack down the seams and take advantage of where you really can see them. And Ian Book was not able to do that. Notre Dame was not able to do that as a whole tonight. It's unfortunate because this game was so highly regarded, and then by the time we get to the third quarter, they're talking about, well, Notre Dame needs to score in order to stay in the college football playoff race and all this sort of stuff. And unfortunately, it seems like this loss has erased the biggest win that Notre Dame had in 17 or 20 years when they won earlier against the number 1 Clemson at home and staging the field. If they got embarrassed tonight, I'm going to go ahead and say it. And now if we're looking at the matchup that's coming up ahead, they have to go and play Alabama, and they're opening up as, I think you mentioned, a 20-point underdog. If you could have a great season, come off the rails real fast if you lose by 30 points to Clemson and you lose by 40 points to Alabama.
Yeah, and we go back to kind of the first matchup and to not take anything away from them, but the big difference in this matchup was Trevor Lawrence and James Skalski, the quarterback of the offense and the quarterback of the defense. Trevor Lawrence is a once-in-a-century type quarterback, type college football player. He just has this championship mindset. He has this, I'm going to put everything on my back and I'm going to go out and win the game. I mean, early on in that game, he checked into a play because he saw that the defense was blitzing. The defense checked into a different play, into a zone read, and Trevor was intercepted because he didn't see it. Mm-hmm. Did it fluster him one bit? I don't think I even saw him. It didn't affect him whatsoever. It was like it didn't even happen. I almost forgot about it because it didn't seem like it even happened to Trevor. But that's just the type of player that Trevor is, that he can just manipulate games so that he can go out there and just win. That's what he does. He just wins. He has one loss in his entire college football career, and it's the national championship game against an LSU team that probably is the best college football team I've seen in a decade or more. But Trevor just has this mindset of wanting the ball and wanting to win. And to me, that was the big difference tonight on that field.
Yeah, and honestly, I took him for granted a little bit because you mentioned that this was going to be a bigger spread. I think you said it was 38-24. I was expecting a close one, 27-24, just because I remember looking at how well DJ played in that first game, throwing for over 400 yards, most of Notre Dame's ever given up. He was so dynamic, hitting explosive plays down the field that I was like, what can Trevor Lawrence really bring that DJ didn't do the first time around? DJ seemed to have a flawless game, didn't have an interception, didn't have a fumble. And then when you come and look at it, you see what he does. It's not just about X's and O's, it's about the Joes. What he does, the effect he has on the team, checking into the right play, being so efficient with the ball. So, I think I kind of underestimated maybe that side of it, maybe just didn't think about it. But shame on me for doing that, because coming in, he just absolutely, again, killed this Notre Dame team through and through. Really unfortunate to see Notre Dame play this way, because it does undercut the biggest win of the year for them. I do want to say that when Clemson lost last time, we were talking about all the injuries we had, people who were not out there. We talked in the last broadcast about Jared Patterson not being on the field, the center for Notre Dame, who hurt his foot early in the year. And then Josh Lugg came in to replace him. Zeke Correll, I guess, couldn't go because of a sprained ankle. I think that did have an impact in this game. He was the center, which is essentially the quarterback of the offensive line. Supposed to be helping, with those dynamic blitz pickups. We're getting pressure up the middle. I don't think it would have changed anything, but I wish that they would have been at full strength having him back. But the problem is he's not coming back. He's not going to be there when they go and play against Alabama. Unlike when Clemson's sitting here like, oh, well, we get to play you the next time. We're going to have all these guys back. That guy's not going to be stepping back on the field again this year. And Notre Dame fans have got to be worried, because I don't see anything from this game that I think is going to be different from when they play Alabama. I think this is the team that they have, and they're going to have to figure out some way to remain competitive with Alabama. Yeah,
and I think one thing that surprised me was Notre Dame's inefficiency to change halfway through this game at halftime. It really felt like the second half was very reminiscent of the first half, where they were trying to run the ball, not doing it successfully, running pretty standard passing plays, and Clemson's coverage just held up. Surprised to see they didn't get Kyron Williams involved in different ways. I didn't see a single screen pass was played, no jet sweeps, nothing really unique to throw a wrinkle into this game plan. So interested to see what Notre Dame does moving forward now that they have this tape of an elite defense stopping what they were planning on doing, and they have to believe that Alabama has this film too. So Notre Dame's going to have to make some changes going into this Alabama game. And watching Alabama, I don't know who stops them. I don't want to play them, that's for sure. To me, they are the number one team right now, and even without Jalen Waddle, who I just heard might be available for the playoffs, which would be super scary. I don't know who stops Alabama at this point. Florida hung in there, so maybe a team that has an elite defense, maybe Clemson can throw some wrinkles, but I mean, you're going up a Goliath that you're going to need to land punches.
Yeah, I mean, last year Clemson went up against the LSU offense, which, let's be honest, was probably the best offense in the history of college football. Everything just clicking at the right time. And they had Jamar Chase, they had Justin Jefferson, they had a first-round running back ends up going to Kansas City Chiefs. They have Joe Burrow, first overall pick. And now you look at it this year, you're looking at Mac Jones, who, I'm going to be honest, I don't think 10 years from now we're necessarily going to be remembering his name.
Never know.
But I think Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith are going to be first-round picks. Najee Harris, fringe first-round pick. I think he has over 27 touchdowns on the year. And then Patrick Surtain is talking about being a top 10 pick. He's a CB for their defense. I mean, if I'm doing the Heisman ballot, which I want to talk about Heisman in just a second, I have Najee Harris, Devontae Smith, probably ahead of Mac Jones. But I mean, if we're talking about five guys, I think those three guys are probably in my ballot for the top five players in the country. And all three of them play for the Alabama offense.
I think all three of them are finalists for top quarterback, top running back, and top wide receiver, which if they accomplish that, winning all three of those trophies, it'd be the first time that any team has ever done that, having all three trophy winners on the same team. And I agree with you. Although the one thing I don't agree with you on is Mac Jones. This guy kind of came out of nowhere, played on the bench behind some really good quarterbacks that are playing in the NFL right now, waited his turn, and has come out and has slung it around the field. 3,739 yards passing, 76% completion rate, 32 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Granted, he's got Najee Harris and Devontae Smith on that team, which makes it a heck of a lot easier. But he's still making those reads. He's still getting pressured. He's still playing against elite defenses. And he's one to watch. He might be one of those surprising Tom Brady guys that you don't expect anything from, and 40 years from now, they're still playing somehow on Sunday. I think, unfortunately, that list, including Kyle Trask, for Trevor Lawrence makes it hard for Trevor to win this Heisman.
It does.
It becomes such a stat award, which Dabo said after this game. It is such a stat award, and Trevor only has 2,753 yards passing, 69% completion, 22 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. So he's 1,000 yards less than Mac Jones, which in the eyes of voters is a big deal. But Dabo made a huge pitch last night for Trevor, stating, you want to hitch your Heisman to this guy. And that's what the Heisman Trophy used to be about. It used to be the best player that represented the game the best. That you wanted this trophy to be affiliated with this player. And in recent years, it's been one of those trophies you don't want to win. Like, name the last Heisman Trophy winner that's actually doing well in the NFL, minus maybe Kyler Murray, who's playing pretty well right now. So I hope that people were listening, and I hope that this trophy goes to Trevor, but I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, again, Devontae Smith, I would put him above Mac Jones, what he's able to do. I mean, just a dynamic playmaker. If that guy was with Trevor Lawrence, I mean, that would be crazy to see. Or if we had Justin Ross all this year. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is doing this with a makeshift wide receiver crew, just switching people in and out. I would also like to see Mac Jones' numbers had they had Jalen Waddle all year. I did not know that there was a chance of him coming back, and that is terrifying because that offense is already absolutely dynamic. If we're just thinking logically, who's the best quarterback in college football? It's Trevor Lawrence. Who's the best player in college football? It's Trevor Lawrence. The stats are just they're so absurd. In my mind, Mac Jones cannot win this award. If you compare him to Kyle Trask, Trask has 400 more yards and 11 more touchdowns and only 1 more interception. So Mac Jones can't win this award because he's not even the best quarterback, statistically speaking. That goes to Kyle Trask. A wide receiver is probably not going to win us. Najee Harris, maybe, but he hasn't been the front runner the whole time. So in my mind, if we're playing stats, cool, then you have to give it to Kyle Trask. You can't give it to Mac Jones. If you're just going with who's the best quarterback, well, then it's Trevor Lawrence. So I'm a little confused why Mac Jones is in the running or at the top of everyone's list when he doesn't have the best stats and he's not the better quarterback if you ask anybody in the country. That's where I get a little confused.
Well, in my mind, Mac Jones isn't even the best player on the field for Alabama.
No, he's third.
How do you give the trophy for the best player in college football to the person that's not even the best player on the field? It's sad. It really is, and I don't understand. There's a lot of armchair analysts out there. I guess we're included in that statistic. That I just don't think they are watching or understand what these trophies mean, what these stats mean, and really delve into the detail that you need to be voting on these awards. Because, like you said, Trevor Lawrence is the best player in college football. He's going to be the #1 pick next year. Everyone said, when you ask people about the Heisman Trophy Award, they're like, well, Trevor's the best quarterback or best player in college football, but I think it's going to go to this person. How does that belong in the same sentence? It doesn't. And that's open your eyes. If you're going to say this player is the best player, then it's no contest. Why are we even talking about it? Which is unfortunate. And you go back to Devontae Smith and Mac Jones and Najee Harris for Alabama and this core that they have. You look at Clemson, who's Trevor throwing it to right now? Howell, who's a 5th-year senior grad student, who this is the first year he started, which has played lights out, taking over for a bunch of injured players, Justin Ross you mentioned, E.J. Williams, true freshman, Spector, true freshman, Amari Rodgers coming back from an ACL tear, who's been amazing, but he's 5'10", he's a slot receiver. Frank Ladson, injured all year, or injured most of the year. Nagata, injured all year. That's who Trevor Lawrence
Justin
is
Ross.
putting up these numbers with these players who are going to be incredible moving forward. And it's watching that game last night. I think the most amazing thing is where Clemson is going to be next year, the year after, and the year after that. Because we're watching freshmen out there playing better than most teams are playing. So only way to go is up for Clemson, which is surprising considering how high they already are.
Yeah, and compare that to Alabama, where Steve Sarkisian, the offensive coordinator from Alabama, he's going to take a head coaching job somewhere. He's just done too good of a job. Mac Jones, I assume, will go on to the NFL. Najee Harris, NFL. Devontae Smith, NFL. Jalen Waddle, NFL. Patrick Surtain, NFL. Every year we say Alabama's not going to be good the next year, and then they come back and are even better somehow. I don't know how they're a better offense this year without Jerry Jeudy, without Henry Ruggs, and without Tua, but somehow they are. It's just an incredible accomplishment on their part. But I don't believe that Trevor Lawrence is going to win the Heisman. Maybe it just sets a bad precedent to give it to him, even though he's the best player in the country, but his stats are not nearly as good. I don't know how you do. If you vote from your heart, it's Trevor Lawrence all day long. But if you want to look at stats, I guess it's Kyle Trask, but no one has Kyle Trask first. Everyone has Mac Jones first. So I don't get it. In my mind, you just can't give it to Mac Jones because he doesn't have the stats to compare to Kyle Trask. So that's my point. That's my point. So basically, just vote for Trevor Lawrence, right?
No, I agree completely. But hey, we got Ohio State is who we pulled in the Sugar Bowl. New Orleans. What do you think of that game?
I think a lot of Clemson fans are happy with that. Let's be honest. If it's between Ohio State and Alabama for us to play, we're much happier playing Ohio State than Alabama. A great rematch from the last game. Ohio State's going to have all the bulletin board material that they're going to want to create, saying that they should have won the game last year. Just a miscommunication at the end of the game. Nolan Turner gets an interception. Sean Wade shouldn't have been ejected. The Justin Ross fumble shouldn't have been over. Whatever they need to tell themselves, we don't sleep at night. Hey, more power to you. Whatever you have to lie to yourself about, great for you. But let's be real. Ohio State, this team is not as good as they were last year. Whether that's because they have less talent or maybe because they played less games or not until full sync, this team is not nearly as intimidating as they were last year. And I thought they were a darn good team last year. So if we're healthy, we're ready to go. I think I sit pretty confident with our team. What about you?
No, I agree completely. I was worried to see how the playoff committee would rank Notre Dame. I think if you're truly going who the best four are, I think Notre Dame's maybe 3. I don't know if they dropped them to 4 to avoid the rematch or if they dropped them to 4 because Ohio State had the Big Ten championship under their belt. Either way, I'm much happier playing Ohio State. I think we match up better against Ohio State. We've played them before and have matched up well. But like you said, I think Ohio State has a lot of that bulletin board material. They've got that. They have never beaten Clemson on their record, and they're going to want to wipe that off, and this is the biggest stage to do that. But on our side of the ball, we got Trevor Lawrence in his last year, only losing 1 game, and that's the national championship last year. And I guarantee you more than anything, he wants to be back there this year. So I don't see a lot getting in that way. Whatever Trevor can do to make that happen, he's going to make that happen. But I'm excited to see our Tigers playing in the postseason once again. College football playoff, 2 versus 3. Stay with us. In a couple of weeks, we'll bring you that pregame of that game. The big note for that one is that Nolan Turner is going to miss the first half of the game due to a targeting call in the fourth quarter against Notre Dame, which is just an unfortunate break. You could see Brent Venables really distraught knowing that he had just lost his safety for the first half. But if we have 2 weeks to plan for that, I'm excited about that. But hey, if you like our content, help us out, subscribe, click the button. Every little bit hurts, every little bit helps. And we're excited that Clemson once again is back to full health and playing the way that we thought they'd play all year.
What a great game. Nice, relaxing. That's what we like it. Like you said, subscribe. More than anything, go Tigers.
Go Tigers.